Hi guys, in this video we're going to do something a little bit different. It's not part of the Postman build series. It's just a video idea I came up with a few days ago. In this video we're going to look at a few different ways how to reuse components in your projects. So the first way we're going to do it is to just copy paste it inside a Flex container. The second method is to use a Flex repeater, which is pretty obvious. And the third way is to use a perspective table component, which might not be as obvious, but it's also pretty simple. So let's just jump in. I have my designer open already. I created a new project called Historical Tags. And if you're following along with this channel or with the videos that I put out, when I installed Ignition Maker, I didn't install Tag Historian because I thought I wouldn't need it. But here we are. We are going to use Tag Historian, at least a simulator for this video. So if you don't have it, just run through the installation, launch the installer. You're probably a few versions behind anyway, so you'll get some new features with the new version, the newest version of Ignition. And you can, when you go through the installer, you can choose to install Tag Historian as well. So here, I have my designer open, like I said, and I'm going to create a new view, and this will be called, this view will be called main. And actually we will have a page URL, and let's create the view. I created it as a Flex container just because that's the one I'm most comfortable with, but I am getting used to column containers or the grid system. So hopefully I can put a video out on that in a few days or weeks or months. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to create another view also. It's going to be called subview, something like that. It doesn't really matter. It's the principle that I want to demonstrate. We don't need to have a page URL for this one. Also, it'll be a Flex container. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, the idea is we're going to have some sort of small view. It'll have some data it'll have some data, and then we're going to use it in our Flex container and repeat it in our main view. So the main view is what we'll launch, and the sub view is just what will be repeated. So let's create the sub view first. On the root container, I think it's a column. Let's set it instead to row, and let's add a label component. I'm just trying to think. I didn't think through this project completely, but I think I can wing this. And then let's also add a spark line. So what you add here doesn't really matter. It's the actual principle that does matter. And hopefully I can demonstrate that clearly enough. And this, maybe, let's try this. Transform, form, rotate. Maybe this will work. -90 degree. There we go. Okay. And then on our sub view, we're going to pass in some view params like label, text, and tag path maybe. Tag path. There we go. Let's actually make our background more interesting. Let's set a different color, background color, and then we'll use a CSS variable called neutral 90. Well, actually, let's do 80. There we go. And then our spark line here, I think the spark, the actual line itself, we can set to var neutral 30 or something. It'll be pretty light, and then the color on the label as well. So all of this is just filler stuff. It doesn't really matter to demonstrate our point here. Okay, var neutral. I hate when my cursor covers where I'm typing. Okay, that's about all I want to do right now. We're going to come back to this sub view here, but let's go to the main view. So in my main view, for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to have 3 different containers. So we'll have a demonstration with just the component copy and pasted here in the left, and then in the middle we'll have a Flex container repeating repeating this subview that we created, and on the right we'll have the same thing but with a table. And I think in the end, I think all three of them will look the exact same, but it's just implemented using 3 different methods. Okay, let's go ahead and get started on the main view here. I want to set it also as a row here, and then I want to put in a column flex container. More accurate, I want to put in 3 right away. And then here, it's about all the setup I'm going to do. Just set them to grow and share the space to grow at the same rate. Okay, and then inside each of these flex containers, I can rename them. It doesn't really matter for this demonstration. Inside each of these, so let me just rename these real quick. Flex copy. Flex repeater, and then this one will be flex table. For our main view here, let's set, hold up, let me go back to our sub view and look at the root container. Carlo here is neutral 80, so let's go to the main view just for something different. And we'll also set a background color. This, of course, is not why you're here, to find out how to set a background color. But it does give it a different look pretty easily with minimal work. It does give it a different look. Okay, so the first demonstration, I think you're all aware how to repeat a component is to just copy and paste it. Ignition makes it pretty easy because every component is just or most components, I should say. I'm not sure if it's every component. Most components are just a JSON string. Like, for example, if I was to copy this root container here, copy and then open Notepad++. I don't know where it's going to open. Okay, for here. You can see it's just a JSON object that means something to the gateway, and then it interprets it a certain way. So what you could do is you could copy these components here. This is a pretty easy way to duplicate components. Let me just save here and then go to flex copy. Let me add a row here just to group them a little bit better, and then inside this row I'm going to paste my components. There you go. And then inside my flex copy container, I'm just going to duplicate this a few times. Duplicate here. Okay, so as you can see, I have 3 different instances of the same component. It's a very simple one, just with a label and with a sparkline. And this sparkline, of course, can be hooked up to tag historian or any other query we want to do, or to a database query. But the point is that you can duplicate a component this way, just using copy and paste. And then inside each of these, you would have to customize each property manually. So this is a pretty good way, and I'll explain why in the end. You may think this is a bad way to duplicate components, but I'll explain why I think it's not a terrible way, just because, well, I'll explain in the end. Okay, for our second demonstration, let's drop in a flex repeater. I think this is a pretty popular, pretty commonly used component. Let me just set it to grow, fill the entire column. And then the view we're going to repeat is called subview here. And after we hit OK, so as you can see, nothing happened, but when we add array elements here, we'll add 3. It'll add our instances here. I'm not sure why. Okay, maybe, oh, so our flex repeater is also has a direction, and it's set to row. We want it instead to column, and then you can see that it appears here. Let's go back to our subview. I believe it's inheriting, so if we look at our width and height, it's 410, 136. Here it's filling, it's actually using the same width here. So we can play around with those settings. That's not what's important. Let's go back to our flex repeater. here. And then if we want to duplicate it and make it look exactly like this view here, which actually let's launch a session. We can see here the reason why it looks different right now is because I have a background color set on my embedded view. And you can see that it fills the entire width of the column. Also, my lighting looks really weird. It fills the entire width of the column, or it uses the subview's default width. You can see here that this here is much wider than this sparkline here, even though they're supposed to be all equal width. So to fix that, let's go back to our designer, and I believe there's a property here, use default view width, and let me just turn it off. Let's actually use the default view height and see what happens. Here we go. It updated right away. You can see that it became wider. So it fills the default view width. Or actually we turned it off, so it's not filling the default. It's not using subview here. If you look here, there's a property called width. It was 410 pixels. When we set this property to off, so on our flex repeater, use default view width, it'll ignore that and just fill as much width as it can. And then, so in our instance, let's go to element style, I believe you can have, or yeah, let's do a basis here. So this basis is 200 pixels. So let's go here and also use 200 pixels. I wonder if that'll do anything. Shrink 0. Okay, this is also not important. This is a pretty common way to reuse components, is to use the flex repeater. What is a downside to the flex repeater is that you define a path here and you can only do one subview. Well, you can actually get around that, but we're not going to go into that in this video. So you can see we're repeating the same component. Say it's a sparkline with a label or anything. It can be a gauge component. And we want to have multiple of them that is pointed to a different tag path or a different query or whatever we want. We can repeat it first by copy and pasting, and then by using the flex repeater, also pretty common. The third way I want to show you, you may not know this, you may already actually know this, but it might be new to somebody. You can use the perspective table. The advantage of using the perspective table, I believe, I actually haven't tried this. I was thinking what advantage there could be. I think you can filter. So let's modify our table. Let's delete this data property here and then add property and add data. And then let's actually, so I don't want to delete 50 elements. So I just delete the property and then re-add it, and I'll change it to an array. So we have an empty array, and then I'm going to disable row selection. I'm going to disable the header. Filter, I'm going to enable. I'll disable for now. I think I'll enable it later. So I want to look for pager. I want to turn that off as well. Okay, this is a pretty default table. I just made some changes to it. So the first thing we're going to do is, remember how in our subview we had two properties on our view. We had label, text, and tag path. Well, if we want to use this method of using the table, we also need to, in our data property here, we need to have an object, and then inside the object we have label, text. This is pretty important. And then some text. And then we can have tag path, some path. Okay, there we go. And let's duplicate a few times. So, okay, we have 4 of them. What we want to do, so the gist of using this method is that you create column objects here. Once I find them, there we go, column objects. Let's create 3 of them. We might create more, I don't know. So the first one we'll call field label text, and we're going to set it to invisible. The second one we'll call it to tag path, and also set it invisible. The third one we're going to call view or something like that. And this third column, we will keep it as visible, and we will also set the render here instead of auto, set it to view. And then on the view path, we want to make it a subview. Let's hit OK here. And then in our view params, you can see that you have your label text. Well, actually, we won't even use this. So let me delete this. Okay, the reason why you don't see it in here is because our data property here, watch this. As soon as I add view, it'll pull it in. There we go. So now that we have the table here, let's see if we can, if there's a similar property where we can justify strict width. Let me actually save here. Let me save and see how it looks in the session. There we go. So it saved, it refreshed right away. You can see that it's using pretty much it's the same thing as using a flex repeater, but it uses a table, and then you can set. So let's look at what property we can set here. I believe it's cell style. Let's add a background color, and we set it to neutral 80, something like that. I don't remember if it's on cell or if it's on row or if it's on body. I don't remember. I do remember that it took me a few tries to get this right. That's the downside of using the table. There we go. So it's actually on body style, and let's save this again. Okay, and you can see that we're repeating components 3 different ways: copy paste, flex repeater, and using a table. The last thing I want to cover here is what if you want to pass in, say you want to pass in certain values, so you don't want to repeat the same component with the same tag path and the same label. You want to have different ones, which in this case for the table, let's start with the table and go backwards. So for the table, we have these 2 columns here, label text and tag path, and then in our view here is enabled to true, is set to true, and then it's using this subview. So let me actually sum text. We do label text 2, 2, 2, or actually 3, just to put in some different data. There we go. So we have different data here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have to make some changes. Here in the subview, instead of, we can leave label text and tag path there, but we're going to add a new parameter, and it'll be an object, and it'll be called row data. So this is pretty complicated to explain, and I believe I covered it in a different video, but row data is passed in by default. So in this case here, row data, when you embed a view, when you render a column as a view, like here, like this view column here, row data is one of the properties that are passed in by default. You can see I have no view params, but it's still passed in. So let's go back to subview, row data, and then let's add label text. Label text here, and another one, let's call it tag path. And then let's go to our label and then bind this to property, params, label, row data, label text. Okay, and then tag path, this won't change. It's the same principle, it's just I don't want to create a tag history binding. So now when we save and go to a session, hopefully it's changed, you can see I'm passing in parameters. It's parameterized. So there's some text, there's 2, 3, and 4. Then if you look here, so main table, some text, for label text, 2, 3, and 4. And then if you set up a binding on the spark line, it'll also, you can define it here and then pass it in to your view column, and you can parameterize and duplicate components that way too. So now the last thing I wanted to try, which I did not try up to this point, let me enable this filter and let's see if I can filter. So like, let me enter 3. I can't filter. Or maybe, hold up, let me try one more thing before I end this video. Maybe there's a property here that's, okay, there isn't a property. So I'm not sure why you would use this third method. It's more complicated to use. Maybe there is a benefit. The upside is it's pretty easy to replicate and it's easy to pass in data. All your parameterized data would just be rows and it'll appear as a new view. That's the upside of the table method. The upside of the flex repeater method is that it's very easy to set up. It literally took us 2 seconds. And then to pass in views, it's less interesting here. To pass in parameterized tag path and label, you just do the same thing. You can pass in, I believe you can just pass in a parameter here. So that's pretty trivial. And then to parameterize this first method, just copy and pasting, you would just go to each one here, flex container, and then change the label text so you're not really parameterizing. In the end, you would think that this copy method shouldn't be used just so you can have replicable projects, but I found in my experience, you're still doing some replication. Well, not replication. You're still doing some manual typing, and it's very easy to copy and paste. It takes no time to copy and paste, and then all you have to do is just change the label text and the tag path. So it's not that much different than if you were to use a flex repeater, because you then have to also define your parameters. It's not like it's done for you where you can give it a list. Well, maybe you can through scripting. It'd actually be pretty easy to do this now that I think about it, but you anyways have to manually, at least the easy way, to go in and define your label text row and tag path manually. And then also for the table, you can't just map. Well, you can, but you still have to put in different data is all I'm trying to say here. But hopefully that was helpful. I know it's not beautiful, but I just wanted to show an easy concept. I also want to keep my videos pretty short, but I'm never able to. I just talk too much and not really say anything. So hopefully this is helpful to go over what we went over. Copy paste is not bad of a method. I use that because it's very, very customizable. You can position anything any way you want it. Flex repeater is very easy to use, and in some instances it's the best thing to do. And then also a table. Let me know in the comments what a use case for the table rendering as a view might be. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Well, maybe not enjoyed, maybe that's too strong of a term. I hope you found useful information in this video. If so, if you want to see anything similar to this, I have a few other video ideas that hopefully will be shorter. Let me know in the comments, and you can send me a message on Discord or send me an email. It doesn't matter to me. The reason why I wasn't uploading for a while now is because I'm in the process of hopefully, fingers crossed, closing on a piece of real estate this week, and I'm probably going to be starting to build a home this summer anyway. So that's why I've been pretty busy, tied up with that, and also with work and some other commitments. Thank you all for being here. That's too much talking on my end. Thank you all for being here and for watching this video. If you have any questions, let me know in any of the ways that I mentioned just now. But that's it for me. I will see you in the next video.